Another month has flown by. We are now 5/6 of the way through the year 2024. 2025 is just around the corner. That means it's time to stop and rank all 19 October new movies that I saw, from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your ranking of the October new movies that you saw. And if I missed something that you think I would like, let me know about it down below in the comment section. With that said, let's get started. In last place, VHS Beyond. Now, as a point of reference, all of the VHS movies make me physically ill. All of the running with the camera and the shaky cam and the even the retro downgraded quality of the visuals, all of that stuff, it makes me physically ill by the second segment. And so I'm turning my head away just to feel less nauseous within the first 20 minutes, and there's still over an hour left. For that simple reason, I do not enjoy these movies. And for anyone that has that same experience that I have, I had that with VHS Beyond. And so simply by the nature of that, I have to put it in last because I literally can't watch these movies without getting physically ill. If you don't have that problem, if you're not in the same situation as me, from what I've heard from other people and for other reasons, my impression is this is one of the better VHS films. There are a couple of interesting segments in here. One where like battling zombies with a twist inside of a house. There's one where they're like falling out of a plane. So there's some cool stuff in here conceptually. I just wasn't able to enjoy it because the movies make me sick. Number 18, Joker Folly Adieu. And this was one of my most anticipated movies of the year because I loved the first film. And it was just an interesting swing where they're following up Joker with a courtroom musical. That's weird. It's interesting. I went into it thinking I might not even like this movie, but at least if I don't like it, it will be for interesting reasons. And that's exactly what happened. Where it's a movie that elicits a reaction from the audience. It actually takes a swing in an era of mediocre films that are appealing to the broadest possible audience, kind of doing the exact same thing with every single movie. And then you have Joker, where they decided to make a sequel to their Martin Scorsese clone by making it a courtroom musical. Their sequel to their film with a Joker skin, and make it like, nah, we're not really doing Joker stuff. Why did you even think that in the first place? A movie that seems actively angry at its own audience and success. That's interesting. Might not be good. Might be just about at the bottom of this list. But at least it's interesting. And I mean, I do think if you dive into it, there's more there than I think some people gave it credit for about identity, the identity of the franchise, and everyone trying to tell Arthur who he is, and he's trying to appeal. Like, there's a lot in there. Did I like it? No. Is it the movie I wanted? No. Did it disappoint me? Yeah, it did. But it's interesting. Number 17, Hellboy, The Crooked Man. Hey, did you know a new Hellboy movie came out this month? It did, and it went straight to video stores. So, point of reference, this movie, as well as the next 7 movies on this, is like a block of 8 movies on here. They're really close. The difference between number 17 and number 10 on this list, it's minuscule. Like, I really struggled on the actual ranking. So if you're like, why on earth was number 14 so much lower than number 11? There's not a good reason. They're essentially my brain pretty well equal. And they're movies that for very different reasons I have them where they're placed here. Anyway, when it comes to this Hellboy movie, I thought it was fine. Even being really low on this list, it's not so much that I thought it was terrible or anything like that. It just didn't leave much of an impact. It felt like a couple episodes of a Hellboy TV show, which maybe that's the direction they should go with this anyways, do the Hellboy TV show, but it feels like you just kind of jumped in and you're watching episodes 7 and 8 of Hellboy the TV show, both with the scope and scale of the threat, the way you just jump into the middle of the story, the production, the budget, all that stuff. It felt like television. And that's not That doesn't make it bad, but it does make it feel a little bit underwhelming as a movie. And when you're like, we're going to do our new version of Hellboy, and the first thing that comes to mind is, felt like a couple episodes of TV. That's not ideal. 16, Time Cut. This is a new Netflix original film. Full reviews are under embargo, so I can't say much about it. I wasn't even sure what I should do with that in regards to this ranking. But the basic premise here is that a girl goes back in time 20 years to try and save her sister from being killed by a serial killer. Which, if that sounds familiar, it's because it's very close to the same premise as Totally Killer from last year. As I said, I'm under embargo of full reviews. I can only give initial impressions. My first initial impression, I much preferred Totally Killer to this film, where Totally Killer leans more into the comedy, more into the fish out of water, modern day high schooler back in the 80s and all the fun that comes with that. This one plays it a little bit more serious as kind of a high school drama with just a different time period and soundtrack. Loved all the songs from this movie. It's a bunch of my favorite songs from 20 years ago, but it doesn't have as much fun to it. Counterbalance to that, my wife preferred Time Cut to Totally Killer. She wasn't crazy about either one of them. She was a lot more disappointed by Totally Killer, but she preferred Time Cut to Totally Killer. And I hate to use this terminology, but you know what I mean when I say this, but she was bugged by the whole woke modern teenager goes back to the 80s, and it kept making that same she's woke and they're not joke in the Totally Killer. So that bugged her, and that sort of thing wasn't in this one. So there wasn't that thing that irritated her about this film. So like I say, can't say too much about it, but generally speaking, I wasn't crazy. It's fine, but I wasn't crazy about it. I didn't think it had as much fun as it could have. 15, Mr. Crocket. I actually saw this one at its world premiere at Fantastic Fest in September. And simply put, Mr. Crocket is like a fun character and mythology of sorts concept there about what if you had this Mr. Rogers-esque television host that was also very Freddy Krueger-esque and
hello, boys and girls,
killed bad parents and kidnapped the kids. There's something to that that's kind of fun. So Mr. Crocket himself pops and stands out. The movie surrounding that premise feels like a first draft. Like, oh, Mr. Crocket, this is a fun idea. What if we combine Mr. Rogers, Freddy Krueger? Yeah. But they never figured out how to convert that into a 90-minute story. And so it kind of gets pretty lost in the lore, and they try and bring some other characters in. This person just kind of knows stuff. Why do they know stuff? Because the plot requires it to happen, and gets very talky in the third act when you're working through some stuff. And so a movie that pops with Mr. Crocket.
I'll be there to protect you in a heartbeat.
But on the actual script and story level, disappoints. 14, Salem's Lot. I haven't seen the miniseries before. I haven't read the book. So essentially this was my introduction to the story of Salem's Lot. And it is a movie that had been long delayed. It was shot 3 years ago, and they were going to put it in the theaters. We're going to do it streaming exclusive. And then it felt like kind of like out of the blue. They're like, oh, we're going to drop it in a couple weeks. It felt like that after we knew they shot this movie a while ago. So it was just sitting there, and then they just kind of dumped it out on streaming. And it's from the writer of It. He both wrote and directed this, though. So there was some pedigree there as a writer, but not so much as a director. And the movie itself, I once again kind of thought was fine. Because I had such low expectations based off of it getting delayed and all this, streaming stuff, I was kind of pleasantly surprised by it. But that's coming from pleasantly surprised because I was expecting nothing. And I was like, oh, that was actually kind of entertaining. It's a little campy. It kind of leans into some goofy stuff a little bit. But that was kind of its charm. I didn't think it was great. Not looking to re-explore it, but better than expected. Speaking of better than expected, Venom: The Last Dance was not better than I expected. Kind of come around to this franchise over the last couple of movies. Wasn't crazy about the first one when it first came out. And then I started to find it kind of endearing and charming in its own little way. But Venom: The Last Dance, like the previous two movies, feels like fun vibes with a messy as can be story and script. Where all three of these movies feel like they had an undercooked script and then they tried to fix it in post and they cut things out and reworked it. All three of them. And there's something that when you're in the third movie and you're still doing that crap, that you haven't worked through this, you haven't figured out how to write a script, you haven't realized how to develop it and get it right in the writing before you start filming, you only get so many passes. And Let There Be Carnage for this franchise got the pass for me. Like, oh, this one has the most of the vibes. Cool. It's choppy story. Cool. Let's fix that by the third one. And I don't feel like it did. Now, on the positive side, the third act, I think, is the best third act of all of these movies. It goes pretty wild with the symbiotes and stuff like that. I think it gets pretty heartfelt and sentimental in a certain way. I want to give it credit for that, but not too much credit because it didn't fully feel earned. It felt like, what are we doing out of the blue, getting all sappy? But hey, I mean, at least you're going for something. But I just wish that I don't know, it felt like the movie they knew people wanted the stuff in the third act, and that's the interesting stuff, but they were still like, well, let's have Venom ride on the outside of a plane. Well, let's have him do a sing-along in a car. Let's have him do a dance number in Vegas. Like, all of these just silly ideas ate up so much of the runtime rather than the stuff that people actually care about. I just don't get what they were going for. What did you like about it?
I thought it was better than the second one. The kind of complexity of the movie. There's a bunch of new symbiotes. The main bad guy in the story was good. The third act was good. The action was fun. There's some really good side characters, and I really enjoyed it. I think this one's my favorite.
12, The Apprentice. I saw this one as a secret screening at Fantastic Fest 6 weeks back. And it was even Sebastian Stan came in and introduced the movie. I hadn't seen a trailer for it. I did know that it was like a Donald Trump movie. And at a festival like that, we're expecting genre films and a lot of the secret screen horror movies, or something like that. As soon as they announced we're playing a Donald Trump movie, rows of people stood up and walked out. Like it was a secret screening. We didn't know what we were going to see. People just walked out because they weren't tired, or they just didn't. They're not interested. They didn't show up for politics. So the movie itself felt to me, for lack of a better, I don't know, whatever's the opposite of fan fiction, hater fiction. It felt like people that obviously don't like Donald Trump, and they're trying to like construct a narrative of his villain origin story. And there's pieces of it that are like obviously facts. There's pieces here of this Cohen guy that was a mentor to him. And a bunch of these incidents did happen and verifiable facts of incredibly shady behavior. But they construct a movie based around the title of his TV show that he would have 20, 30 years after the events of this film, The Apprentice. The concept of Donald Trump was not a great guy, but a well-meaning enough guy. And then he was the apprentice of this Cohen that turned him into the political supervillain of the last decade. And when you put that out a month before an election, I think everybody kind of goes, come on now, we know what you're doing here. Come on. Like, it's pretty obvious that this wasn't coincidentally, we just wanted to tell the story of Donald Trump. Like, that's not what happened. Obviously, you were trying to put something out there that exposed his dirty laundry and put more light on his shady dealings and things like that right before people would be casting their votes. But I also think most people could smell that from a mile away, and people that already hate Trump don't want to watch a movie about Trump. People that love Trump don't want to watch a movie that very clearly is just trying to put him in a negative light. And undecided people are like, come on, how stupid do you think we are? We know what you're doing right now. But, the movie itself, the performances from the two leads, are quite good. In particular, as Sebastian's Trump evolves into the modern version, he like doesn't come off like modern Trump at the beginning at all, and it's the point of it that he evolves and turns into the character that he is now in the public. Could be quite good, and the way that it shows the passage of time through the way it replicates news broadcasts and video quality of the different eras, I thought was very effective. It can be entertaining, but it's just like a project that I think is so limited by its own agenda. Number 11, My Hero Academia, you're next. So I had no idea where to put this one in this ranking. I've never seen an episode of My Hero Academia, so I went to go see this movie clueless, just diving into something I didn't know what I was diving into. My daughter's a big fan, has the jackets, follows all of it, everything like that. So she dressed me up in her jacket, which surprisingly fit me really well. And we went to go see it. Her as the fan and me as the supportive dad. And I thought it, like as an outsider, it worked well enough. I could piece together what was going on in the story. It established a villain that you could tell, like, oh, this is offensive what this guy's doing. And then we go on a journey of trying to stop him. They brought in some new characters that were fun and interesting. And even in the world as the outsider, where all of them are new characters, you could tell that the new people were different, brought a new energy to things, a new dynamic to the interactions and everything kind of happening. I thought it worked well enough. Like, was I bananas about it? Did I love it or anything? No, but as the outsider, it worked well enough for me. Like, oh, that was kind of cool. I get why people like this. I get why this would be something that my daughter would be very into. What did you think?
I thought that it was really good. I like how after like watching like all the seasons and them all being connected, watching something that was just like one short story.
Self-contained story with a beginning, middle, and end.
I like all the villains and how it does kind of connect to the story. Villains were good.
We've got the best My Hero Academia, the worst My Hero Academia. Where do you put this one kind of?
I'd probably put it at like an 8.5.
Bringing us into the top 10, House of Spoils, another one that I saw at Fantastic Fest at its world premiere. And as I mentioned before, the difference between number 10 and number 17 on here is not large at all. Like they're like all in kind of that space of distinctly mixed. And I don't even know with most of them, like, how much do I lean mixed positive? How much do I lean mixed negative? I'm not really sure. They're all in that C+, B-. Yeah, there's something in there that's kind of cool, and there's something in there that kind of holds it back, or this felt like a TV show. It's all that. So please keep that in mind with this ranking. Comes to House of Spoils, I thought it was kind of a fun enough blend of spookiness and chef foodie culture stuff, where it's a little bit of the bear and a little bit of hocus pocus mashed together into this tale. And I heard some people say, like, just because they're cooking food doesn't mean it's like the bear. Like, well, the plot of the bear is a guy comes from a high-end restaurant with big, gigantic demands and goes off to start his own place. The plot of this is person from high demand, chef place, leaves, starts her own place. Like, there's obvious connective tissue there. Both of them have like baggage from being in this high demand, high stress environment. There's obvious connections there. The tone is different because this one is hocus pocusy and brings in witches. So yeah, it's different. But it kind of worked. I didn't think it blended the ingredients quite right. It's a little bit off. It's a fun idea for a movie, some fun elements, but it didn't feel like it was quite enough of any of them while still being entertaining. And it wasn't off-putting. It didn't alienate. It was like, I was tracking along with it, but it wasn't as good as it could have been. Number 9, Your Monster. And back to what I just said before, the previous 8 are all in that mixed category. Your Monster and the rest of these are all distinctly positive reviews. So Your Monster is kind of a modern spin on Beauty and the Beast of sorts, sort of a rom-com, sort of a creature feature, but all with its own little quirky spin on it, where this girl returns home and the monster living in her attic basically doesn't want her to move in, and she's just gotten out of a bad relationship and is trying to get her career going, and they form a friendship and maybe turns into a bit of a romance while she's trying to get her career going again. When it's about the unlikely friendship and romance, it's quite charming, but it tries to do both the romance, her career stuff, and then stuff about self-identity and loving yourself, and kind of have this thematic bridge there. And I don't think it can do like two of them well, but it doesn't balance all three all that well. And the further it goes along, as it tries to pull it all together, the more it's like, maybe it tried to do a little bit too much in here. That maybe she would have just leaned into the one thing rather than all of the career, self-love, all that stuff as well. But charming enough. There's just some fun elements here. 8, Things Will Be Different. I actually saw this at the Overlook Film Festival back, what was that, in April? So a while back. So trying to remember all of the my exact experience with it. But so it's kind of a different sort of time travel story, maybe a little bit of time loop elements in it, where there's like people committing a crime using time travel, and then they have this house that's outside of time that helps them to kind of escape kind of certain things that are happening. But all of this is almost kind of like, that's not what the story's about. The story's about they get stuck at the house and they're not allowed to escape because there's some outside threat that is keeping them there, and sort of some people ruling things that they don't know about. It's tough to explain the movie because it's just different enough. So it's kind of this small, isolated thriller about people stuck at this house in sort of a time, it's not really a time loop, but time loop sort of scenario, trying to figure out how to get out of it, how long they'll be stuck there, who's doing all of this to them, and what will it take to change things. There's several kind of twists and turns along the way. I think it struggles with how much do you leave as intrigue and how much do you want to answer. Is by the end of it, I think that the balance they went with, I don't think will be fully satisfying for everyone. But if you like time travel, time loops, different types of isolated throws, there's a lot of things there that I like that this movie has. 7, A Different Man, another movie that I watched at Fantastic Fest, and another movie starring Sebastian Stan. And actually kind of watched it as a double feature, both of them at Fantastic Fest and him introducing both of the films. And I watched them on the same day. So it's a movie, it's like tough to explain these films without just like walking you through the plot of them sometimes. And that's like when you go to a film festival, that's a lot of times the sort of movies that you see where big Hollywood movies, the ones that they spend a bunch of money on, typically it's pretty easy to explain what the movie is in a quick sentence. Because if you're trying to make money on a $250 million film, you need a movie that's easy to pitch to people, and they go, would you like to see The Rock and Chris Evans as bounty hunters trying to track down Santa Claus who's been kidnapped? As like a PG-13 blockbuster comedy. I say that sentence, you have a very good idea what the movie Red One will look and feel like. A Different Man is about a man that has this specific disorder that causes him to like form like tumors on his face, an actual condition. And he never feels like he can be himself because everyone so reacts to his appearance. And eventually he kind of goes through a procedure that changes him into a different man that takes the tumors away. And so he suddenly appears as a movie star, Sebastian Stan. And then another guy kind of enters his life that isn't, the actor has this actual condition that causes him to look this way. And he meets this guy that in the story that has the condition but doesn't have any of the insecurities. He's very confident. He's very charming. And this guy that now looks like a movie star still has all of the insecurities he's always had. And so he's always struggling with his identity and this different man that is taking his life and living the life that he wanted to live. And it plays with all these ideas. It's a very different type of story in the way that it plays out and explores things. It's a really interesting film. Not one that like I would imagine I just like throw on a Thursday night and rewatch it, but a movie that I thoroughly enjoyed watching it the one time. 6, Piece by Piece. This is the latest Lego movie, and it is a musical biopic documentary about the life of Pharrell Williams, which that is quite the pitch for a movie. That it didn't do great at the box office, which is not terribly surprising when you have those number of circles, the number of people that want all of those pieces kind of cancels itself out. I had some people try and argue with me that Piece by Piece isn't a documentary. It's like people don't know what a documentary is. Like, this movie, it's a series of documentaries of Pharrell Williams, his friends, family, people that he worked with, collaborators, being interviewed and sharing Pharrell Williams' story. That's a documentary. It's visualized with Lego, has a bunch of musical elements to it, but it is a documentary in a very unconventional way, visualized in a totally unique way. I don't think that makes it not a documentary. It's still the exact structure documentaries use. Interviews of people telling a story. But anyway, I thought it was... I went in like, I don't know what to expect. I didn't really know Pharrell Williams' story. I mean, I know a lot of his songs and little connections here and there. And I didn't realize just how many huge projects he was a part of that I didn't realize he was the producer on them or did a beat or whatever. And even his story, there's a lot of just interesting the coincidences that put him on a certain path combined with the setbacks, the grind. As lucky as he was in certain regards, he still had to throw in a ton of work, still had failures and insecurities. I just thought it was a really effective story and told in a unique way. Doing it in Lego, I think in certain ways did hold back your ability to fully understand the passage of time. And when everyone is a Lego figure and they don't put the names on the screen, sometimes it's difficult to tell who you're talking about because it's just like, right, who was wearing that shirt? Like, who had that Lego hairstyle piece or whatever? So some of that I thought maybe could have been handled a little bit better, but overall, much better than I was kind of expecting. 5, Saturday Night, another movie that I watched as a secret screening at Fantastic Fest. We sat down, we did not know what movie was going to show, and I was very pleasantly surprised with Saturday Night, which is a movie that is telling the story of the events that took place the 90 minutes before the first episode of Saturday Night Live aired. And it's chaotic, it's funny, there's a bunch of great performances of these actors capturing these classic Saturday Night Live personalities. So I really enjoyed it. The inherent nature of it, this kind of fly on the wall documentary style of sorts of just there's the cameras rolling, showing what's happening. Inherently with that, it doesn't have as clear of a beginning, a middle, and end, the normal story structures with conflict and character. It's not designed to be that. It's designed to capture a moment that was right before something so important and influential in pop culture for the last 50 years. And I think it did a great job at that. Even just kind of capturing, there's a lot of things that we just take for granted, almost all of us, Saturday Night Live, because it's older than me and it's been a part of mainstream culture for so long. And what this movie captures really well is how edgy, countercultural it was at the time, how it was a bunch of these outsiders bringing in postmodern comedy into a modern era of producers that didn't get it. All this stuff that now Saturday Night Live feels dated and we need the new thing. And, it's the establishment, but it's the anti-establishment. And some of that is so fascinating to watch. Number 4, Smile 2. Now, I was pleasantly surprised by Smile 1. I went in thinking it was going to be a generic horror film, and I actually saw it its world premiere at Fantastic Fest a couple years ago. Recurring theme in here, and we've actually got a couple more Fantastic Fest appearances ahead of this on this list. But was pleasantly surprised because I thought it had a lot more substance to it than I was expecting. Still, the trailers for Smile 2 didn't capture some of the depth of the first films, I was like, I don't know if the second one's going to work. So I went into the second movie, and I was very pleasantly surprised by Smile 2. And in fact, I thought it was better than the first Smile, where it had everything that I enjoyed about the first film, but it was bigger and grander in scale. It was in a more fun context with just kind of the nature of a pop star, her world, and how public it is versus a pro bono therapist in the first movie. It's just more fun with the pop singer and the scope and size of that. And so it just felt very confidently directed, that took everything I loved about the first one and built upon it, and still kind of kept the substance with exploration of self-hate, regret, dealing with expectations, all this stuff. So I just thought it was really good. In third place, Terrifier 3. This one I also saw at its world premiere at Fantastic Fest. In fact, I was able to work the red carpet before the movie played, where I got to interview the director, and my buddy Cody talked with the director as well as the star of the movie. We talked to them after the movie as well. And then when the movie came out, I actually interviewed the director and shared it on my channel. So if you want to hear the whole backstory of the making of the Terrifier movies, highly encourage you to check out that interview, because he goes into full detail. Very cool story of just someone that had an idea and just kept grinding and grinding and grinding. And that process of grinding and crowdfunding has led to him now having the highest grossing unrated film of all time. Also, if it had been rated X or NC-17, it would also be the highest rated X or NC-17 film. So that's very cool. Anyway, as for Terrifier 3, I was so pleasantly surprised by Terrifier 2 when I saw it at Fantastic Fest a couple years ago, where I just loved the way that he expanded the lore, the mythology, told this bigger, grander story. He brought in all these influences from mythological stories, sword and sandals type stuff, and ideas about if you have this dark evil, you have to have supernatural evil, you have to have supernatural good, and just kind of elevated it through all of this lore and stuff like that, and a more in-depth story to it. Not that like the plot specifically is super in-depth, but there's just more moving parts to it. And part 3 was a great continuation of all of that, with more lore. The Santa Claus skin around it made it so that while I think it's a meaner film and less playful in a lot of ways, the Christmas setting elevates it in other ways and gives it the fun by having Art as Santa Claus and all the crazy insanity that kind of comes with that.
And he just said, you should think about putting Art the Clown in Christmas. That would be awesome. It was like something that simple. And as soon as he said it, it just clicked. It felt natural. It's such a joyous, wholesome, family-oriented holiday. It's holy. So I thought everything Art the Clown's not. So then to bring that character into that, it's perfect. Put Art in all those Christmas trope situations, especially to get a lot of levity out of those scenarios. Like, what would it be like for Art the Clown to suddenly be a mall Santa surrounded by all these children? Like, that could be really disturbing, but also very funny. He could do a lot of quirky stuff there. What would it be like if Art actually interacted with who he thought was the real Santa Claus? Like, how funny would that be?
And on a character level, the characters are broken and changed by what happened in part 2, and they're dealing with that in part 3.
Because you're kind of in that survivor's guilt chapter, I assume.
I'd say so.
So that's kind of a common thing. So is there any character, Laurie Strode, or anybody like that?
I mean, one of my favorites that we didn't really discuss, Damien and I, is Mia Allen from the Evil Dead franchise, and she definitely goes through a lot of guilt. She goes through a lot in the 2013 movie, and I'd say they all influenced, especially probably Mia the most, because she's a bit unhinged in that movie, and I get to be a bit unhinged in here, so I'm very excited about that, and hopefully it translated well.
We'll see. I love that movie, so I'll be able to see if it's there.
Yeah, you'll have to let me know.
So I just thought a great continuation of the previous film. Our runner-up, Anora, another movie that I watched at Fantastic Fest. And I'd heard from people on Twitter and things like that they were just glowing about this movie. It's fantastic. Man, you got to check out this movie. For the first 30, 40 minutes of this film, I was a little bit concerned. Not that it was poorly done, but the first third of this movie, before the plot actually kicks in, it's just two fools living very foolishly in an extravagant sense. I just thought, I guess all of these people on film Twitter really love watching fools doing cocaine in each other a lot, because that's what this movie is, and shot really well. And then the plot actually kicks in, and the whole vibe, the tone, the sense of humor shifts, where it's almost like lifestyle porn in the first third, where just watching these extravagant, rich environments, throwing money around, and then the chaos comes in, and you're like, oh, that's what this movie is. There's like one specific line, like 35 minutes into it, where this guy says something, and it was like, that was really funny. That's a really funny line. I wonder if there's going to be more jokes like that in this film. And then the next 90 minutes of the movie is only jokes like that, where it has this chaotic energy, and it's really funny. And it's, as it goes along, you start to realize that the movie's kind of been toying with your perspective a little bit on the transactional nature of relationships, about who was using who, about who cared about who, and why in the context we assumed specific things about each of the characters and what they thought about the other person in their world, and what were they actually drawn to in each of these situations. As you get to the end of it, and it's actually kind of poignant and heartfelt in another sense. It's a really interesting movie. One of those ones you haven't seen anything like it, but definitely had like the first 35 minutes. I was like, what is going on here? And then, oh, there it is. Okay, here we go. Now I get this movie. It took the whole first third, or took getting into the second act for me to understand what the movie was. But coming in at number 1, Superman, the Christopher Reeve story. This is a documentary about the life of Christopher Reeve, who played Superman in the original comic book blockbuster franchise. And then when he was the age that I am now, was in a horseback riding accident and was paralyzed very publicly. And I'm of the age, like I grew up on his Superman movies, and I remember like hearing these headlines about what had happened to him. I wasn't quite old enough to care or be super involved in it, but that was like an extraordinarily important moment in popular culture that this would happen. And it's a story that when you really package it and tell it, just one of the most emotionally moving and profound films that I've seen in a long time. That this man that was the embodiment of being invulnerable in strength became kind of this example of human fragility and how vulnerable we truly are, and was so public in that. And the story captures that, the humanity of him. And even despite the fact that he was this movie star that's so far detached from most of our existences, it always takes it back to him as a man, him as someone trying to be a father, because it's his kids largely telling the story. It's about his wife and the woman that he wasn't married to, but he was with for a long time. And it's so human while telling a story about someone that was Superman to us. And for that reason, it's just so profound. And of movies this year, the one that moved me emotionally the most, right there with The Wild Robot, that also was able to draw out a lot of emotions into very different ways. But for all of those reasons, Superman, the Christopher Reeve story, comes in at number 1. If you haven't seen it, really do go check out this movie. It is incredibly powerful as a film. If you enjoyed this video, I've got more like it. Check out whatever video is being recommended to you right there. YouTube and their super AI, their own Skynet, has looked at your viewing history and my archive of videos, and they think you're going to love that one. So go check it out and see if their AI is working properly, or if not. Hopefully, maybe it's not, because that means their AI is not going to turn into Skynet and try and take over mankind. Anyway, maybe I'm rambling a little bit. Thank you so much for watching. Keep talking movies and TV too much.